Hi everybody, and welcome to class. Today we're going to start talking about World War II. We're not going to get all of it done tonight. In fact, this lecture will probably be a little shorter than some of the others because I'm just going to talk about the events that got Europe into this big mess that World War II is going to turn into. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that you can see this map. So when I'm talking about the size of Germany and Italy and Japan, you can see how small they are. So this blue section right here, this is Germany. Here's Italy down here. And then this is Japan way over here. And they all are going to have dictators that are going to come to the forefront, promising them greatness based off of economic expansion. Because right now in the early 1920s and into the 1930s, they all have economic problems, and being that they're relatively small in size, then it's going to limit how many natural resources they have, how many markets they have available to them. I mean, you can take all three of these countries and easily fit them within the entire United States. Germany wanted more living space. It's known as Lebensraum. And they always meant to get it this way, going towards the east. Italy wanted to return to the former glory of the Roman Empire and turn the Mediterranean into an Italian lake again. I mean, if you think about the height of the Roman Empire and the glory of the Roman Empire, that, had been a distant memory for them, and they wanted that greatness back. And then Japan over here wanted to dominate China. Japan is a skinny little string of volcanic islands that don't have a lot of ability to grow a wide abundance of things. Rice is okay, and some other things they can run livestock, but with volcanic ash, it's hard to grow stuff in. And so they're going to want to expand this way. Their leaders were all very, very charismatic. That meant that they had the ability to draw people in to listen to what they had to say, and were very dynamic leaders for their group. But they all believed that they could fix anything, and they could make their people believe that they could fix everything. These three countries' leaders also used a fear of communism to drive their agenda. They were nationalistic. They were totalitarian. They did not have a lot of political opposition. And so they're going to use paranoia and fear to get what they want. Now, the USSR, and here's just part of it right here. It's huge. They too will have a dictator that will come to the forefront, but they are the lone wolf. They're different than these other three are more fascist, whereas the USSR is going to be a communist group. So let's look at these dictators. First off, right up here, you have got Joseph Stalin. He is the next big leader of the USSR. He comes to power in 1928. This is not right after the death of Lenin. He had to take some time and consolidate his power base. But when he comes to power, he is going to take over all ownership of property and businesses. It's all going to belong to the government. He wanted an atheistic class of society that was based on the equal distribution of goods, a very radical, in-your-face kind of communism. And he is going to go about and systematically eliminate anybody that's going to stand in his way that might have even the slightest bit of opposition to his viewpoint and how he wanted to run the country. He is going to use slave labor to rebuild the economy. He is going to kill more of his people than the Germans do. One of the first things he's going to do is go in and wipe out all of his higher military leaders, which is going to come back to haunt him later. He is extraordinarily paranoid, and so he is going to be looking over his shoulder all of the time. The next one on the agenda is going to be this guy right here. This is going to be Benito Mussolini. Now, he comes to power a couple of years before Stalin does. He takes over in Italy, and he is known as El Duce. El Duce is Italian for the leader. And he is also going to destroy all political opposition. And he is going to have his troops invade Ethiopia in 1936. This is going to be the only time that Ethiopia is ever going to be under the control of a foreign power, whereas most of the rest of Africa had been controlled by European powers for some time. And if you look at pictures of the conflict, it's easy to see why. The Ethiopians are fighting back with a few rifles, but mostly spears and bows and arrows. So it was very difficult for them to withstand the onslaught of the Italians. The Italians are going to join Hitler, especially in their help of Franco of Spain. Franco is trying to overtake the nationalist government in Spain. And so Hitler and Mussolini are going to send their troops, kind of use it as a training ground for later on. Now, Italy is going to side with Germany this time, when in World War I they sided with the Allies, the United States, Great Britain, and France, because they felt like they got gypped out of the Treaty of Versailles. If you'll recall how Italy consolidated its country, it did that by instigating trouble between its neighbors and getting in on the winning side of the treaty. And so they picked the winning side, and they were expecting a whole lot more land advantage than what they got out of the Treaty of Versailles. So they got their feelings hurt, and so this time they're going to join up with the Germans instead of with the Allies. And then you also have these two guys right here. Now, this is the Emperor of Japan, Hirohito, and then this is the Prime Minister, Hideki Tojo. Now, this is the guy that's mostly large and in charge. He's going to lead an attack on Manchuria. Now, I'm going to go back up here to this map so you can see what we're talking about. And if you'll look at the colors here, you can see that by the time we get to the 1930s, Japan already has control of Korea. They got control of Korea early in the 20th century through a couple of wars between themselves and Russia, and between themselves and China. And so they already have control of the Korean peninsula. But they want Manchuria here. They want it for a couple of reasons. They want to put a buffer zone between Korea and the Soviet Union. But this area right here is full of natural resources, and they really wanted access to that. Well, the Chinese who own Manchuria at this time are down here in the lower part of China, and they are in the midst of a civil war between communist forces under Mao Zedong and nationalist forces under Chiang Kai-shek. And they have no ability to send troops up here to rescue Manchuria. So the Japanese are going to overtake Manchuria, rename it Manchukuo, and Tojo is going to do this without permission from the emperor. He believes that it is better to ask forgiveness than it is to ask permission. And so he's going to come back later after they've won the area, and he is going to tell the emperor what has gone on. Now, the United States, in this case, is going to issue the Stimson Doctrine. And basically, this is a slap on the wrist to Japan. No, 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 don't you do that anymore. Bad, bad, bad. But nothing really happens to them. And so Japan and Germany and Italy have paid attention, and this is obvious that they can get away with naked aggression, and nobody's really going to stop them. Now, the last one I'm going to talk about is the one that everybody is the most familiar with, and that's going to be Adolf Hitler. He is not even a German. He's Austrian. Now, yes, there's a lot of nationality bleeding back and forth between the two countries. And so he's going to associate himself as a German. And he is going to become Reichschancellor in 1933. That's kind of like vice president. The president of Germany at the time was a man named Hindenburg. But Hindenburg was really old. And so he is going to die. And on the death of Hindenburg in 1934, Hitler is going to proclaim himself the Führer, which is German for the leader. And he is going to take over from there. Now, some background about him. Not only is he Austrian, he has failed at just about everything. He's a failed artist. He is a failed writer. He is a drifter, and he is violently anti-Semitic. Now, if you don't know what that means, to be anti-Semitic means that you hate Jews or people of Jewish ancestry. And so he is going to promise this pure Aryan race. this master race. And he's also going to promise the German people that we're going to avenge Versailles. We are going to get back everything that we lost and then more. And so he is telling the German people basically what they want to hear. And so once he takes over, one of the first things he's going to do is strip the Reichstag of all of its power. The Reichstag was the German Congress, so it's going to become a puppet organization that does whatever he tells it to do. He's going to dissolve very violently any opposition group, even ones that had formerly been his friends. So he's going to go after the brown shirts, which are the predecessors to the SS and the Gestapo. He's going to get rid of freedom of the press. He's going to establish Joseph Goebbels as the Minister of Information. And he is going to make sure that German people only hear what he wants them to hear. And then he's going to get rid of any laws that don't match up with what the Nazis want to get done. And so he's going to turn Germany into his vision of what he wants the Third Reich to be. Now, back in the early 20s, he is in a political group. There is a political rally at a bar in Munich. And they are having this big rally. It turns into a riot. It's called the beer hall push. And he gets caught up in all this. He gets arrested, and he's going to spend some time in jail. While he's in jail, he is going to write a book called My Struggle. It's known as Mein Kampf in German. And this basically is the blueprint of what he is going to accomplish. If the Allies had happened to struggle through reading this book, because it's extraordinarily tedious to read, then they would have seen what he planned to do, because he's going to carry it out step by step. You can find Mein Kampf on any Barnes & Noble bookshelf. You may only find one copy of it. It is in English. It's about 2 or 3 inches thick, and it is really boring. In fact, and you can find it anywhere in the United States. Up until about 3 years ago, it was illegal to own a copy of this in Germany. They're going to outlaw it after World War II, and they lift that. I guess it's been about 3 years ago now that they lifted that. So let's talk about the timeline of how we get to just these guys taking over and ruling their countries and move it into this huge war. So in 1935, Germany is going to start rebuilding its military against the Treaty of Versailles. Because remember the Treaty of Versailles, they were only allowed to have enough military to protect their borders. Okay. They're also going to reoccupy the Rhineland against the Treaty of Versailles. Now, the Rhineland was that part of Germany. Let me see if I can find you a map that shows it. Here you go. That's the Rhineland right over here. And this was the heartland. This was the industrial heartland of Germany. And they had been kicked out of it. It had been occupied for quite some time by the French. The French will finally go back to France. And so after Hitler takes over, they're going to reoccupy the Rhineland. And then in 1938, you're going to have the Anschluss. It is the nonviolent takeover of Austria. If you have seen the movie The Sound of Music, you know at the end of it, the Von Trapp family is trying to escape out of Germany. And when Maria and the captain come back from their honeymoon, there's all these Nazi flags on their mansion, and that's when the Anschluss has happened. And when the Germans have taken over Germany, taken over Austria. And so at this point, all of the things that Germany has done has been in a non-violent method, just kind of broken treaties and taken over areas. I mean, even the Austrians, they're going to be glad to see the Germans show up, for the most part. They're going to regret that decision later on. But they let them all in. Say, hey, great idea. Okay. So this is something that should have been stopped by Britain and France. They were the ones that were the big authors of the Treaty of Versailles. They wanted the harsh punishment of Germany and wanted to make sure Germany didn't do this ever again. Okay. But they're going to use something called appeasement. They're thinking that if they let Germany get a little bit of this and a little bit of that, then they'll hush. Much like a parent at a store that's got a screaming kid will give them something small to get them to hush. And that usually only lasts until the piece of candy or piece of cheese, whatever they've given them, has been devoured. And so this policy of appeasement is going to continue into all the way into the Munich conference. Now, the Munich conference is about the country of Czechoslovakia. Germany wants part of Czechoslovakia, and Britain and France are going to go, hold up, nah, you have taken this too far. Let's sit down and talk about this. And so they're going to call a conference in Munich, and it's going to be Germany and Italy and Britain and France at this meeting. You'll notice the Czechs aren't invited to the meeting. In fact, they're forced to sit outside in the hallway while these other powers determine their fate. And so Germany's going to say, I promise, I promise, I promise. If you give me the Sudetenland, then I will not want anything else. And I'm going to go back to this map. The Sudetenland is this green part right here. It's kind of a horseshoe part around Czechoslovakia. It was, lots of Germans lived there. But it also was the mountainous area. It was a natural barrier for Czechoslovakia. It was where they kept a lot of their armament supplies. A lot of their arsenal was here. Okay, and so Hitler's going to say, I promise, I promise, I promise that if you just give me that much, I won't want another thing. Okay, and so they are going to, Britain and France are going to agree to this. They're not going to ask Czechs what they think about it. They're just going to take part of their land and give it back to Germany. And this guy right here is going to hop off the plane and declare peace in our time. And it's like, really, guy? Really? Because over the next 6 months, Germany's going to take over the rest of this. So they're not even going to keep their promise to that point. In November of 1938, this here is going to happen. This is known as Kristallnacht. It is the night of broken glass, and the Gestapo are going to be sent in to all the Jewish sectors of Germany and just tear it up. They're going to set fire to synagogues. They're going to bust up Jewish businesses. And then from this point on, all Jews are required to wear a Star of David on their clothes that has Jude written in it. They must produce their papers on demand anytime they're stopped. They are not allowed to take any kind of public transportation. They're not even allowed to own cars. So they have to walk or ride bicycles anywhere they want to go. And so this is the first of the Jewish persecution. Okay. And then in 1939, in August of that year, Hitler is going to send this guy right here. This is von Ribbentrop. He is the German foreign minister, and he is going to send him over to speak to the Soviet Union. Because he already has his plans. He knows what they're fixing to do, and they want to attack Poland. And they don't need the Soviets interfering while they're going about this. And so they're going to send Ribbentrop to work out a deal with Stalin. Now, the Germans weren't the only ones that had been trying to work out a deal with Stalin. France and Britain, even the United States, had tried to make some kind of alliance with the Soviets. And Stalin did not trust anybody. He did not like the Western powers because they were so openly against communism. But I'm not really quite sure why he allowed Ribbentrop in, because Hitler was very outspoken about how he didn't like the Bolsheviks. So that would be the Soviets, that would be the communists. But he's going to welcome Ribbentrop in, and they're going to hammer out what becomes known as the Nazi-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact. And really what this is going to be is an agreement by the Soviets to sit back and not interfere when Germany attacks Poland. Now, there's a secret protocol of this pact that the German army does not find out about until after the fact, and they're not happy about it. To get Stalin to agree to this, they're going to promise to give the Soviets half of Poland. This little part right here. And so, of course, the Soviets are going to jump on that. The reason that the German high command are not happy about this is because they knew that the long-range plans for the Third Reich was to attack the Soviet Union. And they knew that that was going to put them that much further away from Moscow when they got ready to do that. And so at this point, you have got appeasement at its furthest tether. And so when all this comes down and they have acquired the rest of Czechoslovakia. They've got this Nazi-Soviet non-aggression pact. Britain and France are finally going to say, this is it. You make one more move. You turn your little beady eyes on Poland, and it's going to be on. And so this is where we're going to sit at the beginning of September of 1939. And so let me go to my next map, so one you've seen some of before. Now, here's Poland right here. And you see this little section right here? This is known as the Danzig Corridor. And it had been given to Poland through the Treaty of Versailles to give Poland access to the Baltic Sea. But it also had split Germany into two pieces. And Hitler wanted this Danzig Corridor. And that's why he was looking at invading Poland. And to justify this, what he's going to do is he's going to take a bunch of German soldiers, he's going to dress them up in Polish uniforms, and have them attack a German radio station down over here to give him justification for attacking Poland. So on September 1st of 1939, Germany is going to invade Poland. That day, Britain and France are going to give Germany an ultimatum. You stop this, you get out, or war is going to be on. Hitler basically laughs in their face, and so they're going to declare war on Germany. And so September the 1st of 1939 is the official start date of World War II in Europe. Now, it takes about a month, which is really kind of surprising because Poland doesn't have a lot of up-to-date weapons. They're fighting with World War I weapons and tactics, and they're facing the German onslaught of fast-moving tanks and infantry. It's known as Blitzkrieg. And but they managed to hold off the Germans for like a month before they overtake Warsaw. And after the defeat of Poland, everything kind of simmers down for a little bit. We're getting into the winter months. It's harder to fight a war in the winter, so things kind of simmer down. And this is known as the phony war, the Sitzkrieg, where not a whole lot happens. The only thing that really happens between October and March of 1940 is that Germany is going to take over Denmark right up here. And then with the help of some fifth colonist Norwegians, under the leadership of a guy named Vidkun Quisling, they're going to take over Norway. To this day, in Norway, if someone calls you a Quisling, they're calling you a traitor. Just like in America, if someone calls you a Benedict Arnold, they're calling you a traitor. But that's basically all that's going to happen in those 6 months is the expansion of Germany this direction. But in March of 1940, Hitler is going to unleash his war machine against the Western Allies. And France is sitting back over here thinking, okay, we got this. We have built the Maginot Line. And I don't know, if you look real close, you can see this little green line right here. The Maginot Line was a concrete, several stories deep into the mountains, defense system that France had spent time and money to build on the border of France and Germany. And it was impenetrable. I mean, it had a rail line inside of it that you could move supplies up and down. It was about 600 miles long. But Germany's going to do this time what Germany did last time. They're going to go around. Now, if the Maginot Line had gone all the way to the English Channel, then they might have been able to stop them. But Germany's going to come around this way, and they are going to move so fast with this Blitzkrieg. Blitzkrieg is a combination of fast-moving tanks and infantry and dive bombers and fighter planes, and they're going to quickly take over France. And so France is going to get divided into two parts. This part of France up here is known as occupied France. And then this down here is known as Vichy France. It's got a puppet government. A Frenchman is going to be in control of it, but he is controlled by the German government. And so France is going to be overtaken by the Germans. Now, in August of 1940, Germany has laid plans to invade Great Britain, but it's an island, and it's hard to invade an island. And so Hermann Goering, who is the head of the Luftwaffe, which is the German Air Force, is going to tell Hitler, I got this. We're just going to bomb them into submission. And this is when the Battle of Britain begins. It's the nightly bombing of Great Britain. But the British are not what you think they are. You think that the British are so kind and so polite, and they're just going to roll over and die. They don't. They are tough as nails. Their leader, by the time we get to World War II, is a guy named Winston Churchill. And he gets up and talks to a parliament, and he goes, "We will fight on the beaches. We will fight on the landing grounds. We will fight in the cities and in the streets. We will never surrender. Never." That's my very best Winston Churchill. And so they are going to push back. Now, the British also have got something that the Germans don't know about. They have got something called radar. And so they know with this radar system that lines this side of Great Britain, they know when the Luftwaffe is hitting the English Channel on this side. And so they are able to scramble their RAF, the Royal Air Force, into the air and catch them in the air instead of them being caught on the ground. And so they're going to give back to the Luftwaffe just as good as they get, and they're going to eventually be able to drive the Luftwaffe off. So Germany is never going to conquer Great Britain. Now, in June of 1941, Hitler, well, hang on, let me go back a minute, because one of the very first mistakes Hitler makes is in the Battle of France and taking over the western side, is that he corners British and French troops right here at Dunkirk. About 350,000 troops are trapped on the beach. And he will not let his panzers go after them. And so the British are going to take every single thing they can find that will float, from a yacht to a battleship to a rowboat. And they're going to ferry all these guys across the English Channel. And because Hitler did not understand that he who fights and runs away lives to fight another day. And he's going to let all these guys escape. If you've seen the movie Dunkirk, that's what that's all about. And then the next big mistake he's going to make is he's going to unleash his military against the Soviet Union. Now, the Soviet Union is huge. I mean, it starts right here and just keeps on going and on going and on going. And they're going to launch this in June of 1941. It's called Operation Barbarossa. And they're going to do okay for a while. But in October of that year, it's going to start raining. And it's going to rain. And it's going to rain. And it's going to rain. And this part of Europe is not as well developed as other parts. So it's dirt road. And keep in mind, Germany has got to go over more of Poland than what they wanted to go over. They had more. They had to advance further. So they start back here instead of starting right here. And when the rains come, their equipment gets bogged down in the quagmire, the mud that is so thick that it sucks you in. And then in late October, the worst winter that Russia had had in a while is going to hit. And because the Germans had not advanced as fast as Hitler thought they should have and done as well as he thought they should have, he's going to throw a baby fit and say, "Fine and dandy, you didn't do what you're supposed to do, so you're not going to get any winter uniforms." And he's going to make them fight in summer clothing, and a bunch of his military are going to freeze to death on the Russian steppes. And so now he has got in front of him a two-front war, which his military knew they didn't want to fight. And then in December of 1941, the Americans are going to get drug into it because of Pearl Harbor. Now, I will talk more about Pearl Harbor and America's entrance into this war the next time we get together. So until then, y'all have a good day. Thanks.